Nisreen is a technical producer for AMI Audio and a producer on Audiobook Review. Hey Nis, how's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going with you?
I'm doing all right. What did you book today for AMI Audiobook Review?
One of our audiobook one of our audiobook contributors, Sara Hillis, joins us for another audiobook review. James McBride's The Heaven and Earth grocery store begins with the unsettling discovery of a skeleton in a well in a small town. And you can just imagine the mystery of it all. So we add a little sample of Dominique Hoffman's narration to the interview that's coming up next. So stay tuned and you'll get the idea of how the narrator really presents the story and how it influences your experience in the story. So I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, the narration in this book is especially fantastic because he has to do so many very varying accents. And it's one thing if like a book takes place in one place of the world, like Ireland or France, you'd expect to do a bunch of Irish accents and a bunch of French accents, but this is America in the 1930s, and that means there are people immigrating from all over, lots of different European accents and African American accents and vernacular. It's honestly, he's doing narration gymnastics. It's pretty impressive.
The many reviews I've seen online, they love how James McBride addresses themes of racism and social injustice, but also adds humor to it, which is pretty hard to do.
No, it's super hard to do. He had I saw an interview with James McBride, and he had a really interesting thing to say about writing about racism. He said, anytime you write about any kind of divisive issue, you want to focus on the humanity and not the racism, right? Like, in other words, like, you just don't want to be preachy, and this book is not preachy. You've been booking a lot of books for me to review lately, and you've been making me read so many books.
You're welcome.
You're giving me a lot of work. But the thing is, you kind of took me out of a rut. You took me out of a rut because I think in the spring, I really didn't read a lot of books, even though I was a host of AMI Audiobook Review. But it's like I only read a handful in the spring, and then in the past 2 weeks, I've read 4 books, two of which being The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece by Tom Hanks, which we reviewed yesterday. You can find that review on the AMI Audiobook Review podcast feed, in case you're interested. And then this one, the Heaven and Earth grocery store by James McBride. Are you planning on reading this one, the Heaven and Earth grocery store?
Absolutely. This is when I heard the sample, that's what kind of drove me to be like, okay, this is the next one on my list. You can get all the suggestions in the world, all the book suggestions in the world, but honestly, it's so hard to pick up a book and commit to it and love it. It all depends on your taste, right? So I think this has, because they address racism and social injustice, that really got me into it, but it also has like mystery into it, humor into it. They add a lot of elements that I would be interested in. What I look for in a book. So this is something to get your hands on for sure. Like another good summer read.
Niz, I want to thank you for bringing this book to my attention. I think it's going to be a really, I think it's ripe for discussion. Thanks so much.
I'm really looking forward to this interview.
All right, great. That was Nisreen Abdel-Majid. She's a technical producer at AMI Audio, and she's the producer of AMI Audiobook Review. She was joining us from Mississauga. I think we're all set for today's AMI Audiobook Review. Terrible burden to pretend you know everything. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski, and this is AMI Audiobook Review. The quote I just read was from The Heaven and Earth grocery store by James McBride, which we'll be reviewing with a longtime regular contributor to AMI Audiobook Review, Sara Hillis. Hey, Sara. How's it going?
Hey, Pretty good. How are you guys?
I'm doing decent. I'm still reeling from the end of this book, which I finished about a week ago. Before I read the synopsis, I want to know your really quick thoughts. Like, if this review was your thesis, what would be the title?
Oh man. A portrait of a community on the edge of the future.
Oh my God. Okay, that's much better than I would have ever expected. That's beautiful. All right. Let's take a listen to the synopsis so we actually know what we're getting ourselves into here. In 1972, workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania unexpectedly uncovered a human skeleton while digging foundations for a new housing development. This discovery revealed long-held secrets of Chicken Hill, a rundown neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans live together, sharing ambitions and sorrows. Chicken Hill is home to Moshe and Shona, a Jewish couple who run the Heaven and Earth grocery store, serving the area's diverse residents. When the state tries to institutionalize a deaf black child, the community, inspired by Shona's kindness, unite to protect him. The novel explores the struggles of Chicken Hill's residents to survive on the margins of white Christian America and highlights the damaging effects of bigotry and deceit. As the story unfolds, the truth about the skeleton and the boy is revealed, showing that love and community ultimately sustain us. We have a sample from the audiobook. Let's take a listen.
47 years before construction workers discovered the skeleton in the old farmer's well on Chicken Hill, a Jewish theater manager in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, named Moshe Ludlow, had a vision about Moses. Moshe had this vision on a Monday morning in February as he was cleaning out the remnants of a Chick Webb one-night stand at his tiny all-American dance hall and theater on Main Street. Webb and his roaring 12-piece band was the greatest musical event Moshe had ever witnessed in his life. Except for the weekend, he managed to lure Mickey Katz, the brilliant but temperamental Yiddish genius of klezmer music, out of Cleveland to play a full weekend of family fun and Yiddish frolic at Moshe's All-American Dance Hall and Theater 2 months before. Now, that was something.
That was something. That sample was played with permission from Penguin Random House Audio. It's a 12-hour audiobook that you can find on CELA. That's the Center for Equitable Library Access, and you can also find it on Audible or Spotify. All the usual suspects. And it was narrated by Dominic Hoffman, who's a well-known audiobook narrator. Where do you want to start, Sarah? I mean, you recommended this one, so like, how did you? Why did you want us to review this one?
Basically because I'd heard like so many good things about it. Everybody said it was good. Like the big people, Barack Obama, Oprah. I don't know so I wanted to know what was the deal about this book. Like, why was it so admired?
Yeah, and then when you get those kinds of recommendations, you'll go into it with high expectations, which I did too. This book had honestly like mixed reviews. It's like the people who loved it, and a lot of people I think went into it with those high expectations and were left a little bit disappointed. I think that's kind of the curse with getting recommendations from people like Barack Obama, like high profile recommendations like that. It's a double-edged sword. So I read the synopsis. What does it not say about the book that you think would be important to people who would be interested in picking it up?
I'm not sure that it misses anything out, really, other than it's a study in character as well as community. I think there are lots of really good characters in there.
Yeah, so it mentions the Jewish couple Moshe and Shona. And they do get a decent amount of page time, but they're far from being the main characters. They're kind of central to the plot, but they're far from being the central character. The book has tons of point of views. There must be over 15, maybe even 20. And I would go as far as to say that the book spends almost like 30, 40, maybe 50% of the page time diving into the background of these characters. So much backstory.
Yeah.
Did you think it was too much?
Well, for the sort of book it is, I don't think it was too much. I'm going to qualify that and say that because like it's a more what you might call literary minded book, and so its chief interest is not getting the story told in a quick page turning kind of way. It's, as I think I wrote to you, I said it's like a fine wine or a whiskey kind of book. You just sip it, you take little bits out of it, and then you come back and you digest it slowly. And I think that's how you can appreciate it best.
Those character background sections, they are pretty lengthy, but they also feel like self-contained vignettes that read like short stories. And with all these people going to Pottstown, and once you get to like 3/4 into the book, you've been introduced to so many characters and have so much background on so many characters that you really get the portrait of the town. And the town in itself of Chicken Hill, or the neighborhood of Chicken Hill, has so much character because it's built on top of all of these different individuals that are themselves incredibly well developed. Who were some of your favorite characters?
Well, Moshe and Shona were just cool. Moshe always trying to figure out what he's to do next, and Shona just says, well, do this, just get with it, and like, don't dither, just act already. I thought that was cool. Malachi, who appears kind of as this, I don't know, kind of guardian angel figure almost every once in a while in the book. He's cool because he sort of says, I'm sick of America, I'm going off to Europe, and he does. But when he comes back, he's just being a very good friend to Moshe in an hour of need. That's really, really sad. In terms of other characters, Nate is a really interesting character. I really find him very interesting because he has a past, and we don't really know the whole past until we know it, kind of thing. Doc Roberts, of course, is a troubled, a problematic character, I suppose, which is interesting too.
I really enjoyed Doc Roberts. He's the town doctor. He doesn't live in Chicken Hill. Actually, he almost like refuses to go through Chicken Hill, but his dirty little secret is that he's actually the leader of the KKK in the town. And like every other character, you get an extensive backstory to him. And it's fascinating to see how someone in his position would come to join the KKK and be so zealous about their cause. And it's interesting that you would give a hugely openly racist character so much humanity. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier with Nisreen, that McBride writes these characters with humanity regardless of their opinions and how savory they are as characters.
Yeah, I think that's true.
He was
the one.
No, so you go first.
Well, the one exception to that might be a character we see later in the book called Son of Man, but there's interesting elements there too. So he's kind of a bit of a symbol, I think, more than a character. But
I didn't think of that. Okay, let me get to Son of Man a little later.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the plot of the story. So it's a lot of backstories, like I mentioned, but the real plot revolves around a young boy called Dodo. He's a deaf child that gets institutionalized in what's basically an insane asylum because the government people seem to think that he's dumb and he can't take care of himself. And when the town finds out that they're trying to institutionalize him, they try to hide him in the back of the grocery store basement. and everybody does their part to divert the investigators and the people trying to find him. It sadly doesn't work, and it's a really tragic moment. And then the kid, the deaf kid, his name is Dodo. You do see him in the institution for a little bit, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, and he makes a beautiful relationship with another person there who's in the same situation, where he's not dumb. He can take care of himself. He's in just trouble. This other kid called Monkey Pants.
Well, to be fair, he can't take care of himself. He has no muscle control, but
that's true. But you can, yes. That's a good point. Yeah, he should not be in a mental institution. It's a tragedy that both of them end up there, but through each other's mutual support, they support each other really beautifully. It's actually really inspiring. In that mental institution, there's a character, one of the caretakers, and that's Son of Man. And unlike every other character in the book, Son of Man has zero backstory, and he's a psychopath and has no complexity whatsoever. And I thought this was poor writing. I thought it was like neglectful on the part of McBride. You thought it was a symbol. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I think he uses Son of Man as a mirror for Nate, for his own past, and B, which I can't tell you about because you need to read the book, and B, a sort of symbol of what America is coming to, what society made him into, what his life has made him into. I mean, basically he's not a character because everyone else is talking about him, so he's he's not part of Chicken Hill, and so most people don't know anything about him, and there's no time for anyone to get to know him, and so because of that, we just don't know much about him. But I mean, there's plenty of people like that maybe they are still humans, and they are still humans, but they do horrible things in these kinds of institutions, which is clearly what he did. So.
Yeah. It made me wonder, the fact that he didn't have that extensive backstory. When you hear backstories from all these other characters, it makes you realize that people are the way they are for a reason, because they come from somewhere and they've been through things. And then when you don't get that backstory for a character like Son of Man, it makes you wonder more, like, how did he become this way? Like, why is he such a broken, messed up person?
I think it all has to do with Nate, because Nate says, "It ain't your fault." That's what he says. That's all he says to him, really. And it's like, that's a symbol. It's a trope. He's trying to express something there. James McBride, I mean.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
One thing I thought this book did really well was set up the start. So in the synopsis, they make it seem like it's a mystery novel, and it kind of is, but it has a twist to the way the mystery is set up. It's not a classic murder mystery where you find a body.
No.
The thing is here, you don't get an identity on the body. It just says a skeleton with a red mezuzah clutched in its hands at the bottom of a well. And that's the entire mystery. That's all you know. And then the entire book is spent learning about the town and all its different people, and this story about Dodo and being institutionalized and people trying to stop him from being institutionalized. And then when he finally does, they try to break him out. And then at the very end, you finally get that resolution, find out how one of the people in the town ends up being a skeleton in a well that they dig up 40 years later.
And
it makes you wonder, like, oh, okay, so who's gonna end up in the well? Like, it's interesting. I kept making predictions, like, I feel like it's this person's gonna be in the well, and then things happen, I would change my prediction. Like, I love that aspect.
Well, and I guessed it was the person it was gonna be somewhere in the middle of the book, but I didn't know why. Like, I guessed wrong about why.
So you predicted it, you just didn't have the right reason for it.
Yeah, because the right reason is so out there. It's so amazing. Like, such a confluence of events that happens.
Yeah, it seems like a weird, like what actually ends up happening at that well is a bit of a twist, and it seems like a weird coincidence, but also seems like one of those things that's a twist of fate and was meant to happen. Like in real life, you would say like, what are the odds? But the truth is those kinds of coincidences happen in life all the time.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
What did you okay, so you seem to be generally pretty positive on the book. Was there anything you thought was lacking or left you wanting more?
Not really. I mean, I think it's a kind of book I don't read a lot of. These sort of like again, the connected little vignettes. You're like, well, where is this going? You're kind of a little bit like, whoa, but then it all does come together in the end. You know, you have to kind of stick it out and have faith. And I was quite satisfied with how it all came out, in the sense that there was a payoff there, like, for me.
Yeah. And after the final resolution, there was a really beautiful epilogue that really tied everything together. And you really care for the character of Dodo. I listened to that epilogue 3 times. It was that beautiful. And I don't know, it seemed to be written in a very different style. It was very like poetic and used a lot of flowery language, which I don't think McBride writes particularly flowery. Like it's not the most literary way of writing. But the epilogue really stood out, and it's something that really like tied a bow on the book that I thought was really beautiful.
Well, I would challenge the non-literary aspect of what you just said. I think he's a minimalist, and yet he also uses cadence and rhythm in a really cool way. He writes for how things will sound, I think, to some degree. And he writes in a very accessible style, in a sense that he doesn't use a whole bunch of huge words all the time, right? No. But he writes as the book deserves. He writes for the book, I think. Like, yeah.
He writes for the book.
Like, he writes for what the book's supposed to be, I guess.
It's that makes me wonder if authors literally change their writing styles based on what they're trying to write. And it's like match a different writing style with different. I guess it would be a real challenge for an author to willingly change their writing style.
Yeah, there's always going to be telltales, I think.
Yeah,
this is the first James McBride I read, so.
Yeah, me too. So I can't really speak to his idiosyncrasies, but I did really like his writing style. I want to talk about the narration really quickly. What did you think of Dominic Hoffman? This was a particularly difficult book to narrate, given all the different accents. How did you think he did?
Yeah, he did great with the accents. I heard an interview with him where he said, I talked to a lot of Jewish friends about how to say words, and then I got like 3 different versions of pronunciations, depending on where you're from and that kind of thing. So that was fun for him, and he himself is kind of the best person to narrate this book, I think, because his father was black, and his mother is white, Polish Jewish, who became a Christian later. So he's got all this stuff like already. It's like he's the product of the heaven and earth grocery store in a weird way. I don't know, he wouldn't probably say that, but like, I just think it's interesting given all his background that he ended up being the one to narrate this book. He's an actor. He's very good. He says himself he's less he's less happy narrating. He's more happy on stage. But he likes to do narration. It's not his preferred way of doing things, because he has to sort of rein himself in so much, right? Like,
he said that publicly, that he like doesn't even like narrating.
No, not that he doesn't like it, just that it's harder for him.
Oh, it's just harder.
It's harder, and it's like because he wants to just jump around and be in the character, and like, when he has to sit there in a booth going, I'm just talking like this all the time, blah 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 blah, like.
Right. Other narrators that I've spoken to have talked about the mental exhaustion of narrating an audiobook. You're constantly on for hours at a time, and it's also just physically draining too. Straining your voice like that, you never get a break, and your brain is on at like 100% all the time. It's a difficult job. I do want to bring in Nisreen because she's been in the background listening in. Niz, I know that you've listened to a little bit of this book. What did you think of Dominic Hoffman doing all of these accents, like all over the place, like African American accents, Jewish accents, Lithuanian accents, Romanian accents, Irish accents? It was all over the place. Like, what did you think of that?
I think I want to hear the behind the scenes, the practice part of his narration, because I feel like that's talent. You just I don't know. I feel like you can't learn it that quickly. So just him doing all these types of different accents, it makes me wonder, like, I want to hear the practice samples of his narration, right?
Yeah.
The work that went behind organizing all of this, and remember how you did X character's accent and how you did Y character's accents. I've heard that a lot of narrators will actually keep spreadsheets and like audio samples of all the different characters and how they do it, because you know that these books aren't recorded all in one sitting. Far from it. It can take months to record these things, and you don't know how you recorded like, certain characters, and become like inconsistent. Like, it's a huge challenge.
It's so
Sarah,
it's a big talent.
Sarah, we're nearing the end. Did you have any final comments on this book? Anything you really wanted to bring up today?
Just that I think you're right. If people are going to either love it or kind of be meh on it, I think it's that sort of book. I loved it. I don't know if I need to read it again, but maybe several years from now I might read it again. I think it ought to be studied in high schools further down the line.
Yes. It definitely has that vibe, eh? Like the type of thing that you would read in 12th grade English class. It just feels like it. It's one of those books.
Yeah, and it's a really good contribution to literature. I think you did a great job.
I thought one of the most interesting aspects of this book, and it wasn't the main theme by any means, but it was the way different migrants to America, not assimilated, but integrated to the country. Yeah. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. Some people never identified as Americans. Some people embraced it right away. People like Doc Roberts, whose family has been in America for 300 years, have this very like elitist mindset because they've been here for 300
except they really
years.
Hadn't, right?
Yes, except that ends up being a lie. Yeah, he's had this like family lore where his family came on the Mayflower, like one of the first ships that transported Europeans to the Americas. Like, he really thought himself so much better because he was here 300 years prior, even though indigenous people had been there for thousands of years. Nisreen, are you sold?
I'm sold. I'm on it. This is the next book on my list. I said this before. I feel like the narrator really sets the scene for the story, and that's what makes you really want to start like listening to it for sure. When you hear the sample, and that's what drove me to it. That's what got me.
Niz, I want to thank you so much for jumping in like this. Sarah, thank you so much for recommending this book. You can stay in touch with Nisreen if she needs some guidance, or if you need some emotional support by the end.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
That was Sara Hillis. She's a longtime regular contributor to AMI Audiobook Review. If you're interested in picking up The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, know that it's available on CELA. That's the Center for Equitable Library Access. It's also available on Audible or Spotify, all the regular suspects. A quick note about the AMI Audiobook Review. We're still posting all of these episodes as podcasts to the podcast feed. Just look up AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. I was your host. This was AMI Today, and we'll be back tomorrow at the same time for more of what's happening on AMI Today. Thanks for listening.